Let us be Muslim by Sayyid Abul Mawdudi, edited by the late Mr. Khurram Murad. May Allah bless all the souls. Chapter 8. Can we call ourselves Muslims? Brothers in Islam, you now understand that according to the Quran, men go astray in three ways. The first is to ignore the guidance of God and become slaves of desire. The second is to give precedence to family, culture, society, customs, and the ways of forefathers over the law of God. The third is to ignore the way enunciated by God and His Messenger and follow the ways either of so-called important people or of other civilizations and culture. A true Muslim. A true Muslim should be free from these three ailments. Only someone who is a slave of none but God and a follower of none but His messengers can be truly called a Muslim. A Muslim sincerely believes that the teaching of God and His messenger is absolute truth, that whatever runs counter to it is false, and that it contains all that is good for men in this world and in the hereafter. A Muslim who has complete faith in this truth world at every step in his life look only to God and the messenger to guide him and submit to whatever they require. Such a person will never feel trouble in his heart about obeying God's commandments or to be concerned if members of his family or society upbraid him or if the entire world opposes him. In such case, his response will be unequivocal. I'm God's slave, not yours. I have faith in His messenger, not in you. What is hypocrisy? Serving the self. On the other hand, a person may say, these may be the directive of God and the messenger, but it is difficult for me to accept it because it seems to be harmful. So I shall act according to my own opinion as against the guidance of God and the messenger. Obviously, no faith can be alive in the heart of such a person. He is not a true believer, that is mu'min, but a hypocrite, a munafiq. While he verbally claims to be a servant of God and a follower of the messenger, in reality he is a slave of his own self and a follower of his own opinions. Adherence to society and culture. Similarly, a person may say that whatever the injunctions of God and the messenger may be, a certain practice cannot be given up because it has been followed since the times of his forefathers. He too must then be reckoned among the hypocrites, however prominent the mark on his forehead traced by prostration in endless prayers and however pious his face. The spirit of Islam has not entered his heart. Islam does not consist merely in bowing, rukû, prostration, sujood, or fasting and pilgrimage, nor is it found in the face and dress of a man. Islam means submission to God and the messenger. Anyone who refuses to obey them in the conduct of his life affairs has a heart devoid of the real Islam. Faith has not yet entered your heart. His prayers, his fasting, and his pious appearances are nothing but deception. Imitating other people. Again, someone may, in defiance of the Book of Allah and the Messenger's direction, urge such and such ideas and practices to be adopted because they are prevalent in the West. This particular behavior must be accepted because other nations are making progress because of it. This point should be considered because an important person is advocating it. Such a person is in grave danger of losing his faith. His attitude is irreconcilable to Iman. We are Muslim and want to remain Muslims, then cast overboard every suggestion which is contrary to the injunctions of God and His Messenger. If you cannot, it ill behoves you to claim to be following Islam, to assert that you believe in God and the Messenger, but to ignore their injunction in the conduct of such lives in favor of other people's thought and practices is neither Iman nor Islam. It is sheer hypocrisy. Allah leaves no doubt about the ridiculous nature of such conduct. Indeed, He has sent down revelations clearly showing the truth, but God guides whomever He will to a straight path. They say, we believe in God and the Messenger and we obey. Then after that, a party of them turn away. They are not true believers. And when they are called unto God and His Messenger, that He may decide between them, behold, a party of them turn away. But if they are in the right, they will come unto Him submitting willingly. What? Is there in their heart sickness? Or are they in doubt? Or do they fear that God and the Messenger may be unjust towards them? Nay, it is they who are doing wrong. All that the believers say whenever they are called unto God and His Messenger, that He may judge between them, is that they say, we hear and we obey. It is they who are the successful, who so obeys God and His Messenger, and fears God and has awe of Him. It is they who shall triumph. Surah An-Nur, ayat 46 to 52. Let us reflect on the definition of Iman set out here. What is Iman? It consists in submitting yourself willingly and totally to the Book of God and the guidance given by His Messenger. Whatever guidance and commandments are received from these sources, you must implicitly obey, and no arguments against them should be listened to, whether they come from your own minds, or from members of your families, or from outsiders. You can only be a Muslim if you develop this attitude. If you do not, you are no more than a hypocrite. A four-letter word nowadays. Compare now yourself with those who had real and true Iman in their hearts, and see how they obeyed Allah and the Messenger. The true faith. Abstinence from alcohol. You know how widespread the drinking of alcohol was in Arabia. Men and women, young and old, all loved to drink. They sang songs in its praise and were totally addicted to it. You also know how difficult it is to give up drinking after becoming addicted to it. An alcoholic would rather give up his life than stop drinking. If he cannot get alcohol, he becomes worse than a physically ill person. Yet what happened when the prohibition order was given through the Quran? Those same Arabs who love alcohol more dearly than their lives broke with their own hands the containers they were drinking from. Alcohol flowed like water in the streets of Medina. One group of people with drinking vessels in their hands heard the proclamation of the Prophet, blessing and peace be on him, prohibiting alcohol. Those who had vessels close to their lips put them away before a drop could enter their mouth. Such is the strength of true Iman. This is one of the finest examples of submission to Allah and the Messenger. confession of crime. You know what severe punishment Islam has prescribed for adultery. 100 strokes on the bare back. The very thought makes a person shudder. And if a married person is involved, the punishment is stoning to death. One trembles at the very mention of such terrible punishment. But have you heard the story of the man who committed adultery at the time of the Prophet? Blessing and peace be on him, and had the strength of faith to face its consequences. There were no witnesses. There was nobody to take him to court, nobody to report him to the police. Yet the Iman in his heart admonished him. As you have gratified your desire in contravention of the laws of God, you must undergo the punishment prescribed by God for it. So this person presented himself of his own accord before the Prophet, blessing and peace be on him, and said, O Messenger of Allah, I have committed adultery. Please give me my punishment. On hearing these words, the Prophet turned aside as if he had not heard the man, but he moved in front of him and repeated his request. The Prophet, blessing and peace be on him, again turned aside, and again the man went and stood in front of him and made the same request for the third time. Such is the power of true Iman. For one who has such Iman in his heart, it is easy to be punished with 100 strokes on his bare back, or even be stoned to death. But it is difficult to go before God as a disobedient servant. Severance of familial ties. You also know that in this world nobody is dearer to us than our relative. Fathers, brothers, and sons particularly are so dear that we are willing to sacrifice everything for them. But now think of the battles of Badr and Uhud, and see who fought against them. A father in the Muslim army was drawn against his son, was in the army of the Kafir, or the son was on this side and his father was on the other side. One brother was on this front and another brother on the other front. Close relatives confronted each other and fought as if they were strangers. It was not for the sake of money or chauvinism or personal enmity that men fought against their own flesh and blood. It was for the sake of God and the Messenger that they had the strength and courage to sacrifice the love for their fathers, sons, brothers, and whole families. Giving up cultural norms and custom. You know, too, that Islam demolished practically all the ancient customs prevalent in Arabia. The greatest evil of all was idol worship, which has been practiced for hundreds of years. Islam told people to give up this evil as well as alcohol, adultery, gambling, theft, and armed robbery, all of which were rampant at that time. Women used to walk about unveiled. Islam enjoined them to observe purdah. They were not entitled to a share in inheritance. Islam decreed that they should have one. Indeed, no ancient custom was left untouched. But do you know in what manner did those who truly believe in God and the Messenger submit to all this? The idols which had been worshipped for centuries and all whose altars, sacrifice had been offered for long, they broke with their own hand. Family customs which has been passed down from generation to generation, they totally abolished. Objects which have been considered sacred, they trample under their feet when ordered to by God. At his command, too, things which had been regarded as prohibited became permissible, which had been considered clean suddenly become unclean, and the unclean become clean. Practices which provided profit or pleasure during the days of kufur were given up for the sake of God. On the other hand, injunction laid down by Islam, no matter how hard it was to obey them, were gladly accepted. This is what true Iman means. This is what is called true Islam. Suppose the people of Arabia had at that time said, "We do not accept this thing because it will harm our interests, and we cannot give up that thing as it profits us greatly. We shall continue following this particular practice, since it is what our forefathers did, and our society approved, while we like certain ideas of the Romans and will adopt them, and certain practices of the Iranian which appeal to us. Had they in this way rejected all tenets of Islam, there would, as you can imagine, have been no Muslims in the world today." The way to God's pleasure. Brothers, the Quran says, "Never shall you attain true piety unless you spend in the way of God out of what you love." Surah Al-Imran, ayat 92. Herein lies the essence of Iman. This is the real spirit of Islam, that you must be prepared to sacrifice for the sake of God, if necessary, whatever is dear to you. In many affairs of your life, God's commandment beckon you in one direction, while your own desires urge you in another. God commands you to do a certain deed, but you think that it will cause trouble and loss. God forbids you from a certain action, but you consider it to be pleasant and beneficial. On one side is God's pleasure, and pitted against it is almost everything in this world. At every step in life, we are faced with two paths. One is the path of Islam, and the other of kufur and hypocrisy. By giving up the things of this world and bowing to the commandments of God, you adopt the path of Islam. By rejecting God's commandments in order to satisfy the desires of your hearts and the temptations of the world, you take the path of kufur and hypocrisy. Muslims of today. So many Muslims today are all too ready to accept whatever is convenient in Islam, but all too quick to change direction when conflict arises between Islam and kufur. This weakness is found even among some of those claiming to be the greatest champions of Islam. They will shout, "Islam, Islam, Islam," and sing many songs praising it until their mouths are dry. They will be seen doing some work for Islam, but if they are told, "Let us now implement the law of Islam, which you are praising so highly," they will at once say, "There are some difficulties and obstacles. It is better to leave things as they are for the time being." What they mean is that Islam is a beautiful toy to be displayed on a shelf and praised from a distance, but to be strictly avoided if the question is raised of enforcing its laws to govern ourselves, our families and relations, and our businesses, and the general conduct of our lives. This is the attitude of even some so-called religious people today. As a result, neither prayer nor fasting, nor reciting the Quran, nor outward adherence to the Sharia is effective. When the soul departs, what feats can a dead body perform? Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim.